What is the creepiest or most unexplained event that you have ever experienced? Story 1. I was staying at my friend's house for the weekend, and he had let me sleep in his guest bedroom while he took the couch. The guest bedroom was cozy, but I always have trouble sleeping in unfamiliar places, so I had taken some melatonin to help me fall asleep faster. I remember waking up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and as I was walking back to the guest bedroom, I saw a figure standing in the hallway. It was just a silhouette because the only light on was the one in the bathroom, but I could tell it was humanoid in shape. I assumed it was my friend, so I didn't think anything of it and went back to bed. A few minutes later, I woke up again, but this time I could hear something breathing heavily in the room. I sat up and saw that the same figure was now standing at the foot of my bed, and it was definitely not my friend. It was about 5 feet tall and had long, matted hair that covered most of its face. I couldn't see any distinct features, but I could feel its eyes on me. I was paralyzed with fear, and I couldn't even bring myself to scream. The figure just stood there for what felt like hours, and I could hear it breathing the whole time. Finally it spoke. Its voice was raspy and barely audible, but I could make out what it was saying. "I see you," it whispered. "You can't escape me." I closed my eyes and prayed for it to go away, but when I opened them again, it was still there. This time, it was closer to me, and I could see its face more clearly. Its eyes were sunken and black, and its mouth was open in a permanent scream. I knew then that this wasn't just some figment of my imagination. This was real. Suddenly, the figure lunged at me, and I felt a cold hand grab my ankle. I screamed and kicked it off me, and when I opened my eyes again, it was gone. The next morning, I told my friend what had happened, but he just laughed it off and said it was probably just a nightmare. But I knew it wasn't. I could still feel the coldness of its hand on my ankle, and I knew that whatever it was still out there waiting for me. Story 2. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, and my friends and I always loved exploring woods behind my house. One day, we stumbled upon a clearing that we had never seen before. In the center of the clearing was a woman dressed in white, with long dark hair that fell in waves down her back. She was crying quietly to herself, and we could see tears streaming down her face. As we approached her, she suddenly stood up and let out a piercing scream that echoed through the woods. We were so terrified that we turned and ran as fast as we could back to my house. We didn't dare to look back until we were safely inside with the door locked behind us. The next day, we went back to the clearing to see if we could find any clues as to who the woman might have been. But when we got there was no sign of her. We searched the woods for hours, but it was like she had vanished into the air. We told our parents about what had happened, but they just brushed it off as a figment of our imagination. But I knew what I had seen, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about that woman. Years went by, and I had almost forgotten about the incident. But one day, while browsing the internet, I stumbled upon a story about the White Lady. According to the legend, she was a ghost who haunted the woods crying out for her lost child. I don't know if what I saw was really the White Lady or just a lost woman, but I do know that I'll never forget the feeling of fear that washed over me when she let out that scream. Story 3. I have had many strange experiences in my life, but one that still sends shivers down my spine happened when I was living alone in an old apartment building. It was a one-bedroom apartment on the second floor with creaky wooden floors and drafty windows. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps coming from the hallway outside my bedroom. They were slow and deliberate, like someone was pacing back and forth. I got out of bed and cautiously opened my door, but the hallway was empty. I thought it was strange, but assumed it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. The next night, the footsteps returned. This time I could hear them more clearly. They were definitely coming from the hallway, and I could even hear the sound of breathing. I froze in fear, not knowing what to do. I decided to investigate the next day and asked my neighbors if they had heard anything strange. They all said no, but one of them told me that the apartment building used to be a hospital back in the day. Apparently, there were rumors of strange happenings and unexplained deaths. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, and the footsteps continued every night. I started to see shadows moving around the apartment, and objects would move without explanation. One night, I even woke up to find my bedroom door open, even though I was sure I had locked it. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and moved out of the apartment. I never found out what was causing the footsteps or the strange occurrences. To this day, I still get chills thinking about that old apartment building and what might have been lurking in the shadows. Story 4. As a child, I never believed in supernatural occurrences, but something happened to me that I just can't explain. I was staying with my grandparents for the summer and had been playing with a girl my age who lived down the street. Let's call her Lily. One day, I was playing in the backyard when I saw Lily walking towards me. She looked different than usual. Her hair was shorter and she was wearing clothes very different to her usual ones. But I thought maybe she had just gotten a haircut and changed her outfit. She told me she was moving away and wouldn't be able to play with me anymore. I was devastated and begged her not to go. When I went inside to tell my grandparents about Lily's departure, they looked at me in confusion. They told me that Lily had moved away a month ago and that they didn't know anyone in the neighborhood with that name. I was stunned. I could have sworn I was just talking to her in the backyard. Years later, I was home for the holidays and decided to drive through the old neighborhood. As I drove by Lily's old house, I noticed a young girl playing in the front yard who looked exactly like Lily did that day. I approached her and asked her name, but she told me her name was Sarah. I asked her about the previous owner of the house, and she told me that her family had lived there for as long as she could remember. I couldn't shake the feeling that something strange had happened to me all those years ago. Was it just my imagination playing tricks on me, or was it something else? To this day, I still can't explain it. Story 5. I grew up in a small town surrounded by dense forests and rolling hills. My family lived on the outskirts of town, where there were only a few houses scattered around. Our house was the only one on our side of the road, and beyond us lay miles of untouched wilderness. As a child, I loved exploring the woods around our house. There were endless streams to follow, fallen trees to climb, and all sorts of wildlife to observe. But there was one area that always gave me an uneasy feeling. It was a small clearing about a half-mile from our house where nothing seemed to grow. The trees around it were stand and twisted, and the air always felt heavy and still. I asked my parents about it once, and they told me that the land used to belong to an old hermit who lived in a cabin deep in the woods. He had passed away years before, and the land had been left to the town. No one ever went there anymore, and they warned me to stay away. But of course I was curious. One day, when I was about 12 years old, I convinced my best friend to come with me to explore the clearing. We made our way through the dense underbrush, and soon we were standing in the center of the clearing. It was even creepier up close. The ground was bare with no grass or plants of any kind. The trees around us were gnarled and twisted like they were trying to escape the clearing, and then we heard a sound. It was a soft, almost imperceptible whispering. At first, we thought it was just the wind, but then we realized it was coming from the trees. The whispering grew louder, and suddenly we could make out words. "Get out," the trees seemed to be saying. We didn't need to be told twice. We turned and ran back to my house as fast as we could. Years went by, and I forgot about the clearing. I went off to college, got a job, and started a family of my own. But then, one day, I found myself back in my hometown, taking a walk in the woods. As I walked, I felt a sense of unease, like something was watching me. I tried to shake it off and keep walking, but the feeling only grew stronger. Suddenly, I heard a voice. It was faint, but I could make out 2 words. "Get out." I turned and ran as fast as I could. When I got to my parents' house, I told them what had happened. "People say that land is cursed," my mother told me. "No one ever goes there anymore." After that, I tried to put it out of my mind, but the feeling of being watched stayed with me. The unease I had felt in the woods suddenly made sense. I couldn't get this feeling out of me, that there was something evil there. From that day on, I never went back to the woods. I didn't want to risk hearing that voice ever again. Let me know your stories in the comments to be part of a future video. Like and subscribe to be notified of new uploads. and click on this video to hear more stories.